Honorable President of the Parliament, dear guests, colleagues, students, it's really a great honor for me and privilege for the University of Tartu to host the presidents of the parliaments of 6 nations here at the University Assembly Hall. And to do this on the occasion of the 105th anniversary of one of the most important treaties for Estonia, so the Tartu Peace Treaty, which ended the Estonian War of Independence. And it's therefore fitting that at today's meeting we also draw attention to this memorial just behind me, which is dedicated to the students who gave their lives in that war. Although we mark the signing of historical document, it would be difficult to find a more topic time for today's meeting. On Estonia's Independence Day, 24th February, it will be the 3 years since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion to Ukraine. But Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has now lasted more than a decade. The support of all of us for Ukraine is unwavering, and we all hope that this war will reach a just and lasting settlement for Ukraine as soon as possible. So we know that adversary that Ukraine is facing. The entire free world, including its academic communities, like the university, we must stand united and strong behind Ukraine, both in the war against the aggressor and in any peace talks. So we support Ukraine for as long as it takes. So today's meeting is not about the past, but rather it's about the future. And I'm pleased to hand over to the moderator of today's meeting, Professor of Comparative Politics at the University of Tartu, Piret Ehin. So Piret, the floor is yours.
Honorable Rector, Speakers of Parliament, Ambassador, members of the university community, dear guests. We have gathered here today to discuss how to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine has been going on for more than a decade, bringing indescribable suffering and destruction. Hopes are high that 2025 will bring peace, but it remains unclear how that peace can be attained. There are crucial questions about the unity and resolve of Ukraine's allies at this critical moment amidst global turmoil, geopolitical shifts, and domestic political changes. Our discussion today coincides with the 105th anniversary of the Tartu Peace Treaty, signed on February 2nd, 1920. This treaty is often referred to as the birth certificate of the Republic of Estonia, but it also serves as a stark reminder that treaties can be broken and do not in themselves guarantee security and lasting peace. Our focus today is not on quick fix temporary solutions. The fundamental question is what must be done to ensure peace and security in the long term for Ukraine and for Europe for generations to come. My name is Piret Ehin. I am Professor of Comparative Politics here at the University of Tartu, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator of today's discussion. Now, this event was announced as a debate between the parliamentary speakers of 5 countries: Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Perhaps some of you were wondering, where is Ukraine's voice in this discussion? Let me assure you that we made every effort to bring to you Ukraine's perspective. we had a surprise for you. The plan was for the Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Mr. Ruslan Stefanchuk, to be here today, speaking directly about what Ukraine needs at this critical time. Unfortunately, due to pressing obligations, Mr. Stefanchuk had to cancel his participation at the last moment. However, I am very pleased to welcome the Ambassador of Ukraine to the Republic of Estonia, Mr. Maxim Kononenko, who stepped in at the last moment. Welcome, Mr. Kononenko, and thank you for being here. I am honored to introduce the esteemed speakers representing the parliaments of 5 countries that are close allies of Ukraine. Mr. Lauri Hussar, President of the Estonian Riigikogu, Mr. Jussi Halla-aho, Speaker of the Finnish Eduskunta, Ms. Daiga Mieriņa, Speaker of the Latvian Seimas, Mr. Saulius Skvernelis, Speaker of the Lithuanian Seimas, Mr. Szymon Hołownia, Marshal of the Polish Sejm. Thank you, honorable speakers, for joining us. Our time today is very limited. We have only 1 hour. I will begin by giving the floor to each panelist for very brief introductory remarks. Your time, dear speakers, is limited to only 2 or 3 minutes. Please convey your most important messages. I apologize in advance if I have to interrupt you. It is imperative that we have time for questions from the audience. We will start with the ambassador, followed by each of the parliamentary speakers. The speakers may choose to speak in their native language. For translation, please use the headphones. To follow the discussion in English, choose channel 1. To follow the discussion in Latvian, channel 2, Lithuanian, channel 3, Estonian, channel 4. The key questions for today's discussion are: is there a path to ending Russia's war on Ukraine in 2025, and what does it take? Also, what does Ukraine need the most at this critical moment, and how can its allies best support it? After the panelists have spoken, we will open the floor to questions from the audience. Due to time constraints, I kindly ask that you keep your questions brief and to the point. Please note that this event is being recorded and is broadcast live. Mr. Kononenko, your statement: what does Ukraine need the most at this time?
Mr. Rector, honorable speakers of parliament, dear Piret, dear guests, it's great honor and pleasure for me to discuss how to be here today and to discuss how to end the Russian-Ukrainian war and achieve a lasting, comprehensive and just peace for Ukraine. This morning, the chairman of the Verkhovna Rada, Mr. Ruslan Stefanchuk, outlined our needs and our expectations. If I may add anything, it is a deep look into the nature of the conflict, because understanding of its nature helps define the tools for resolution. Our war is existential. If Russia wins, Ukraine will cease to exist. This time, Russia won't miss its historical chance. They do not recognize the existence of Ukraine as a sovereign state and the Ukrainian people as a separate nation. For them, we are just incorrect Russians who speak the wrong Russian language. Ukrainians need to be re-educated into the right kind of Russians or destroyed. There are no other options. So Ukraine will never surrender. On the other hand, as Zbigniew Brzezinski claimed, without Ukraine, Russia ceases to be an empire. By choosing empire, Russia simply cannot implement it without Ukraine. Without the history of Kievan Rus, Russian history shrinks to just a few hundred years. Without Kiev, a spiritual cradle, Moscow cannot claim to be the center of orthodoxy. Without Ukrainian industry, Russia cannot compete in space and aviation. If Russia absorbs Ukraine, it will restore its influence in Eastern and Central Europe. Russia will rewrite the global order and impose a new Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact or Yalta II. Russia's geopolitics, economy, and Putin's dictatorship depend on war. Ending it without victory would collapse Russia. So Russia will not lay down its arms. The existential discrepancy is so profound and acute that there is no simple answer to how to end Russian-Ukrainian war. We Ukrainians, we have already formulated our vision. President Zelensky proposed the peace formula as a diplomatic solution and the victory plan as a bridge to peace. I will only say that in this regard, that both documents are based on the understanding that the war can only be ended by forcing Russia to stop it. Any realistic scenario must include two major components: increased sanctions and isolation of Russia, as well as increased military support for Ukraine. There is no other recipes. Another key component is solid, long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. Yesterday we watched a documentary about the Tartu Peace Treaty, a lesson in history. In 1919, Estonian forces backed by allies defeated Soviet Russia but lacked security guarantees. The result, lost independence in 1940. Today, Estonia corrected this mistake by joining NATO and the EU. Ukrainians cannot afford another Budapest Memorandum. The era of naivety is over. If Ukraine doesn't get solid security guarantees, as well as means of strategic deterrence, Putin will return with an army 10 times larger than in 2022 to fully occupy Ukraine. It is in NATO and the EU interest to integrate Ukraine into collective security. Answering the question, what does Ukraine need the most at this moment, and how its allies best support it, it would be easy for me to list types of weapons the Ukrainian army desperately needs, to talk about financial support or humanitarian aid. But I want to say something else. We need our allies to be true allies, not just friends, not just partners, to recognize their role in this war and share responsibility with us. We need your foresight. Our allies must clearly define their strategy and vision for ending the war. Formulas like "we will support you for as long as it takes," they do not end wars. They only prolong them. Please set a strategy and provide us with necessary weapons and funding to make it work. We need your resolve. Excessive caution, escalation management, and appeasement are all weak strategies that have never worked with Moscow. Russia understands only the language of strength. Only peace through strength. Maximum economic and military pressure will work. We need your resilience. We need our allies to be as resistant as Ukrainians to fight Russian propaganda and hybrid influence as we fight Russia on the battlefield. Of course, we need your support in negotiations with Russia. No existing negotiation table can bear the weight of this conflict. That's why we created together with you the Peace Summit platform. If Russia is at war with the world, it is the world that must put Russia in its place and force it to end the war through strength and diplomacy. And finally, we desperately need you to believe in us. Maybe in 2022 you couldn't because you didn't know us, but now you do. You know who we are and what we are capable of. Believe in us and in our victory, and it will surely come. Thank you so much for your attention. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Honorable Ambassador. Now to the speakers. Please convey your main messages in 2 to 3 minutes to make sure we have time for questions. Mr. Hussar,
Thank you very much, Piret. And I'm very glad that actually Mr. Ambassador mentioned yesterday's movie, which we watched in the Estonian National Museum about the Tartu Peace Treaty, because in this movie there had been also an answer also for today's problem. And the main message of Tartu Peace Treaty is actually this, that the peace under our condition is possible. It is possible because we saw several times Russia behind the negotiations tables, and there is so much bluff in there. But if we are talking about the real strength and the real capabilities, these are in our side, and it had been also during the Tartu Peace Treaty signing in our side. And it actually showed us two things. That the economic pressure for Russia is important, so therefore we need the sanction packages, and now we are on the 16th sanction package, but we need even more actually to bring Russia behind the negotiation table, because if really their economy is affected, they are very vulnerable. So therefore we need to push pressure on Russia's economy. A real pressure that they can't use anymore. The shadow fleets, I don't know, hidden companies, hidden controls, etc. They just can't do it, and it should be really, their economy should really be affected. This is vital. Another part is, of course, military. That we should continue to support Ukraine as much as we can to build up their military capabilities, as they are in the front line and they know their best how actually to fight with Russia's war of aggression. And just now we know also that there is a need for building up even more drone capabilities. So therefore this is actually also our duty now to find the resources for them to build up their capabilities to fight on air with drones, but also with other capabilities against Russia, in a way that they really feel that they are not defended enough, and this is also another part of it, how to bring Russia to between the negotiation tables, and of course our common will to act together, to be a coalition of like-minded countries, which is actually standing against dictatorship and brutality, is very important here. And as we all here, probably the most like-minded countries in the world, we are standing firmly behind Ukraine. And I said it also to my colleagues that if we'll take the Nordic countries and Poland together, we are the second biggest supporter of Ukraine after United States. And this is really something that I would say that we are in the very forefront of the democratic world with this very special coalition. Thank you very much, my colleagues.
Thank you. Mr. Halla-aho.
Thank you, moderator. The point I would like to raise is that for the past 3 years, we have been reacting to what the Russians are doing, and we have been trying to guess or predict what they will do next. And speculating about how and when this war will end. Whereas we should focus more on defining our goals and strategies. What do we want to achieve in Ukraine, and how can we achieve those goals? I believe the only legitimate goal in Ukraine is a Russian defeat. Now it's a very good question what a Russian defeat might mean. Clearly, Russia cannot be defeated in the same way that Nazi Germany was defeated in 1945, because nobody will march to Moscow. In my mind, a Russian defeat could mean a situation where the Russians understand that time is not working for their benefit. Right now, What is incentivizing Mr. Putin to continue this war is that he believes that time is on his side, that he can win this war by attrition gradually, that we and the Ukrainians will run out of resilience and material. And we must convince Mr. Putin that this calculation is wrong, that we can outlast him and that we can outproduce him. Now, how to achieve this? Declarations and big words and political commitments and expressions of solidarity are not enough. We need money and we need the physical ability and capacity to produce ammunition and weapons, both for our own defense and for helping Ukraine. And this brings me to my second point. There has been much concern in Europe over the past couple of years and even now about the US presidential elections and how Mr. Trump's re-election might, what kind of an impact it may have on the US commitment on the defense of Europe. This is a very legitimate concern, but unfortunately we don't have a vote in the US presidential elections. We will have to cooperate with any administration, and they are the ultimate guarantee of the collective defense of NATO. So the real problem is not the United States. The real problem is our utter deep reliance and dependence on the Americans. And I believe that Mr. Trump's supporters have a very good question when they ask why the American taxpayer should bear the responsibility for the defense of Europe and aiding Ukraine when Europeans themselves do not seem to be too interested in their own affairs and in their own security. So we need to do more ourselves on the national level and as members of NATO. As Mr. Hussar said, the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries and Poland and some others are doing their fair share, both in terms of investing in their own defense and in providing support for Ukraine. But unfortunately, we are small countries, and it's absolute numbers that matter with an adversary like Russia. So we need to be talking, we need to continue to talk with our big European partners and to convince them that it's also in their long-term interests not to allow any kind of Russian victory in Ukraine, because that would create a very dangerous incentive, not only for Russia, but for every rogue state in the world, that aggression will be rewarded. And this is something that we have to avoid. And also my last point, I know I probably already used my 3 minutes, but I completely agree with the ambassador of Ukraine that we shouldn't only think about ending this war, we also must think about preventing the next war. Russia has imperialist ambitions regarding Ukraine and maybe other countries. So in order to prevent a new aggression, Ukraine needs credible security guarantees. We can't have ad hoc security arrangement like a Budapest memorandum because it's worthless. At this moment, NATO is the only provider of security guarantees that Russia takes seriously. And therefore, I know this is a complicated question, but we must work very hard to create a pathway for Ukraine into NATO membership. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker Mieriņa, please.
Augsti godātie kolēģi,
Esteemed colleagues, esteemed Rector, Excellencies, guests. First of all, I would like to thank my Estonian colleague for the invitation, and it is truly a joy to visit the historical University of Tartu. This university had a vital role in shaping the statehood and national self-identity of Latvia. The most important issue of today is there a path to end the war? And can we do more to help Ukraine? First of all, I want to thank all of you. The support of local people is important in all the countries. Thank you for your unwavering support for Ukraine. Is there a path to end the war? This is a very complicated question at the moment. Currently, we are operating based on assumptions about possible ways to end the war, about the possibility of implementing a peace plan, because there are always opportunities, but is there enough will? And we see that Putin does not have a will to end the war at the moment, not really. As colleagues mentioned previously, it is in Putin's interest to drag out this war, to weaken Ukraine. We see what is happening on the battlefield. Russia is ready to send out Russian soldiers with no regard for their lives. But Ukraine is trying to go a different way. Ukraine cares about the lives of its soldiers. So Ukraine is focusing on modern technology, on production of drones, new military capabilities, new military technologies. And we see that the values are different in Ukraine. Looking back at our history, on our historic memory, we have always seen that Russia does not care about human rights and humanity, and Russia will always find someone else to blame. There is a very important aspect. Peace talks are actually already ongoing at different levels, in different ways, and it is important to ensure that Ukraine is participating in all of these talks. We should prevent the situation that has happened in history time and time again, that our fate is decided by someone else without our participation, and later on we have to face the fact after someone else has decided it for us. Therefore, it is important that Ukraine can participate in peace talks and Ukraine can make its own decisions regarding the peace conditions, about just conditions that Ukraine is willing to accept on its way to peace. What Ukraine needs at the moment. Just now, in January, I went to Ukraine in person, and we saw in Ukraine that Ukraine has made huge strides in military industry. It is progressing very fast, but resources in Ukraine are insufficient. Actually, Ukraine's production capabilities are 30% larger than the current funding allows. So this is a signal for all of us that we need to do more. We need to provide lacking funding, the necessary resources, so that Ukraine can reach its full production capabilities. In addition, we saw delays in additional support for Ukraine, both in the US and the EU, and these delays have been decisive in what's going on at the front lines. And these factors have also contributed to the opportunity of Russia to keep moving forward. We need to reduce red tape and bureaucracy. We need swifter action and decisions. Of course, financial support is not the only thing that Ukraine needs for a victory. We need to think about strengthening our own capabilities and our own military industry, the military industry of the entire Europe. Talking about sanctions. Sanctions have brought results. There is evidence that Russia's economy is not as powerful as Russia would like it to be. And actually, it's hard to predict at what point Russia's economy could actually collapse and to what extent. Of course, nobody can give a definite answer or definite time frame, so such predictions are pointless. But it is clear that we need to continue imposing new sanctions and containing Russia. And currently we're working on the 16th sanctions package. An important aspect is the Russian shadow fleet that is causing huge damages to our countries. In the Baltic Sea, shadow fleet vessels should also be sanctioned. And people who are participating in these sectors that are detrimental to our countries. I think we should be more critical to our own societies as well, because we live in peacetime, and more particular, I think we should pressurize Russian opposition a bit more as well, because Russian opposition is not doing anything at the moment, and it is their moral responsibility to stand up against the ruling regime. Good luck to us all. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. Mr. Skvernelis, please.
Good morning once again, dear colleagues. I would like to express my own opinion. This is my personal opinion. If achieving peace in Ukraine is possible, and what is needed for that. Certainly, peace treaty is necessary. What type of treaty and on what conditions? Because the peace treaty is meaningless on its own. Let us recall the times over 200 and more years when Russia, no matter what it was, the Tsaristic Russia or the Soviet Russia, that it broke the treaties or agreements. So in order for this peace treaty to be sustainable, we need to fulfill several conditions. First, no agreement behind Ukraine or on behalf of Ukraine. We should not decide the future of Ukraine on Ukraine. Ukraine should be the participant in this process. Condition number 2 for the peace treaty is the deoccupation of the occupied territories. This is the key condition to ensure sustainability of the peace treaty. Another condition in the occupied territories, over 3 years, we've seen the arrival of colonizers, people transferred to Ukraine. These people should leave the Ukrainian soil to their homeland or the place that Putin sent them from to Ukraine. And another condition is the full membership of Ukraine in NATO. Otherwise, it is useless. And one more condition. Russia should be held accountable as a perpetrator of this war, both in legal terms, legal responsibility and liability, the military tribunal, and in the economic terms by paying for the acts committed for Ukraine. And the last point I want to mention is that we need to understand the mentality of this country. We will be trying to achieve the peace treaty with this country. Sanctions are needed. Yes, they are effective, but they will not give us the result that we need. I hope that I will be translated correctly. I would like to give a joke about the mentality of Russian people. It is not a secret for you that Russians are fond of drinking a lot of alcohol. And once a worker comes home and tells to his child, well, the alcohol has become more expensive made by the government. And the child asks, so does this mean that, Dad, you will be drinking less? And the dad says, no, you will be eating less. So if we speak about economic sanctions that will affect Russia and give effective result, in hopes to have fewer resources for the Russian military. It means that Russian people will have less resources for their daily needs. So let us understand this, and let us understand this in assessing our rival. Because if Russia has a minor chance to break the treaty, it will do it. And let us agree that we should not allow any frozen conflict, because this is the biggest mistake that will allow Russia to rebuild and restore its military capabilities and continue the war.
Thank you. And finally, Speaker Hołownia.
Thank you. When it comes to the question, what can we do to make Ukraine win, I think we should concentrate on two dimensions of the possible answer to this question. The first is what we can do directly to help Ukraine, and Poland is trying to do whatever we can to support Ukraine with 44 packages of military help, with equivalent of 5% of GDP spent already on military help and help for the refugees of Ukrainian refugees in Poland, and we will be continuing to do so. Should we support Ukrainian way to European Union? Of course we should, and hope that during our presidency we will open not only one cluster but possibly 2 or even 3 clusters if it will be only possible, and more, I would say more, that we should encourage other countries on this example that the way to European Union is open. I mean Armenia, I mean Montenegro, I mean Albania. Why? Because divided Europe is a dream of Putin, and united Europe is a nightmare of Putin, and we have to unite our societies, we have to unite inside of our countries and outside in Europe, on the European level, in different formats, to show that we are cooperating, because this is the axis this world is right now working over. There is working on. There is cooperation on the one side and rivalry on the other side. We have to switch, we have to move into cooperation mode when our rivals, when Putins of the world are trying to show us that divisions are better, are more profitable, and they are selling better. And that's why I want to say that, of course, we have to support Ukraine in the way to European Union, in the way to NATO. We should send all the money possible. We should send all the equipment possible. And I once said to President Zelensky, you can ask for whatever you want, because being on your very position, we would be doing the very same thing. You are at war. Your people are harassed every day by these atrocities prepared by Putin. So you can ask for whatever you want, and we should be able to extend our own capabilities to meet this expectation. And this is the second level. This is the second level we are missing very often, and Jussi, Halla-aho already mentioned it. To help Ukraine effectively, we should restart European Union. Not demolish European Union, but restart European mentality. We are right now working, as Jussi said, on not on the proactive mode. We are still in the defense mode. We are reacting to these words of Trump, to the other position and idea of Putin. We should switch to proactive mode. And we shouldn't make Europe great again, because Europe is already great. It's the best place for living, for people to live in the whole world. And you have thousands of polls showing that. Right now we have to rebuild our own potential. We have to invest, and Mario Draghi said it in his report, 800 billion euros in ourselves to larger our capacity, to larger our potential, research and development potential, defense and industry potential. We should build our munition factories as crazy. We should unify our tank and military system. We should to build our own submarines, our own armaments. Right now in Europe we are spending yearly 75 billion euros for defense. 80% of that is leaking outside of European Union. It's crazy. We should keep this money and treat it as an investment, not a expenditure, as an investment in our future. If we will be economical power, if we will be united in cooperation, this will be the nightmare of Putin, that he wanted and he started this war to divide us. He started this war to show that he's a ruler of the world. And as it was very often in Russian history, it was like this, that they started the war and the result effect was just the opposite. We should perform this pattern once again. He wants us to be divided, let's unify. He wants us to be weakened, let's strengthen. And we can do it only together. So if we think about supporting Ukraine on the longer scale, we have to think how to restart this European mechanism of making Europe great superpower in the world. And I hope that Ukraine will be a member of United Europe very soon. We have to be ready for that. We have to build bridges right now, not only fences. So if you will, my last word, if you will be looking what can we do to support Ukraine, we have to do it because it's an emergency. But we won't be able to do it in a perspective of 5 or 10 years if we won't take care of ourselves. Not selfishly, because if we will have the potential, we will be ready to give more and more and more and establish peace whenever it's needed. My last word, because I've been in Ukraine a couple of months ago, and it was just heartbreaking. You know, it was a heartbreaking experience to visit Bucha, to see all of these murdered people, you know, to see things that they are not only atrocities, it's just hard to imagine that something like this is possible in the 21st century. It's not only the war between two superpowers, it's the war of values. Of two worlds of values, and we should always remember that. We shall not compromise our values. This is the most important pillar of our democracies, of our European community, and of every one of our countries. This is the most important thing. This is the confrontation of the two huge value system. And we are on the right side. Right now, we know it, but it should be not only about emotion, as my colleagues already said, it should be very pragmatic attitude to what is going on right now in Europe. So we will be with Ukraine till the victory. It's a European reason of state. We will be helping you with anything possible, but for that, we need to have the potential. We have to rebuild again.
Thank you. Mr. Hołownia. And thank you to all of these esteemed speakers for the important points they made. Now, dear audience, it is your turn. I will collect 3 to 4 questions. I'm afraid we only have time for 1 round of questions and answers. Please wait for the microphone. Keep your questions short and clear. If your question is directed at a specific panelist, please say so. The panelists, please feel free to address the questions selectively. We won't be able to address all of the questions by each of the panelists. Questions to members of the panel. Yes, please.
Good morning, dear esteemed visitors, guests. I'm a student of the University of Tartu. I'm from Ukraine, and I have a question to you. We spoke a lot about Ukrainians, and your support of your governments has been invaluable for since the 21st of February 2022 and many years before that. But my question is about the Ukrainian citizens who are currently in your countries. So I want to ask what your governments will do after the Brussels will decide not to extend the temporary protections for Ukrainians in your countries. What will your government do that way? Will these Ukrainians be let out of your country? Will they stay? Will you introduce some local temporary protection and stuff like that? Please answer really briefly. We don't have a lot of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And Professor Sutrop over here.
Esteemed guests, speakers of the Parliament and Ambassador. My name is Margit Sutrop. I'm a professor for practical philosophy at Tartu University and member of the Estonian Parliament and also a member of the support group for Ukraine and Estonia. I would like to ask, since we are here in the university, in Tartu University, I would like to ask you, what do you think that the universities could do to build up this capacity to defend democracy, to prepare for the victory of Ukraine, and for the lasting peace? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And over here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Elena. I'm also from Ukraine. Thank you for your speeches today. I'll be brief. What would you say to those partners or allies who are actually pushing for a quick peace deal or even normalization of relationship with Russia? How do we make everyone understand that not everything Russia says can be or should be trusted? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a final quick question? Yes, over here.
Zdzisław Śliwa, Baltic Defense College. I have just Marshal Hołownia mentioned quite a lot about unity. Are you afraid of some nationalist and populist trends which could hit European unity? Thank you.
Thank you. We have collected 4 questions focusing on Ukrainian citizens in the EU, what universities can do to defend democracy, what to say to those who push for some sort of a quick deal or ceasefire, and the question about European resolve and unity. So please, speakers, very briefly, we only have about 12 minutes. Please keep your remarks very short. And Mr. Halla-aho, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If you allow, Madam Moderator, I would like to address the last question. There are different, I believe the approach of a specific country to the conflict in Ukraine and how it should be ended depends very greatly on the geographical distance and how relevant the population and the politicians see this conflict for their own lives. So it's understandable that on the Atlantic coast, it may not seem quite as necessary to prevent a Russian victory in Ukraine as it does in the Baltic countries or Finland or Poland for obvious reasons. But one has to understand that people in Germany or in France, they vote for the so-called far-right and populist parties for reasons. And I'm more or less convinced that Russia is not the reason why people vote for the AfD, for example, in Germany. The problem is immigration. This is what usually makes people vote for populist parties in Western Europe. And the fact of life is that for as long as the mainstream parties do not take those legitimate concerns of their population seriously, those populist parties will continue to grow, and it will have all kinds of negative side effects. For example, in the approach of those countries to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. So take the legitimate concerns seriously, and then you will get rid of the populist parties.
Thank you. Mr. Hussar?
Yes, answering to my colleague Margit, actually, I think the universities are doing already a lot as they are participating in developing For example, the new drones, and I know that also the Estonian universities are cooperating here, but even more the universities in Ukraine are really working very closely together to develop new equipment to the military, and how to develop the drones, which you just can't take down with the drone weapons, and these are actually the new tools which has been used and which has been developed more or less in the scientific area. And of course, if we are talking about how to tackle the hybrid threats, I think here is the role of the universities is very high actually. How to face the new cyber and internet threats, how to defend yourself from hostile activity in the social media, etc. And here the role of the universities is very high actually. How to face the problems and how to actually find the solutions to actually save the societies from these threats. So it is very important work that you are doing also here in Tartu.
Thank you. Speaker Skvernelis.
I'll be very specific to your question on the temporary protection measures. I'm convinced that they need to be extended and will be extended. If something unexpected happens, I believe that out of all the countries that are represented here, the solutions will be found for the Ukrainians to have necessary legal and humanitarian status in our countries. Colleague from Ukraine knows very well what Russia means and what Russia is. Therefore, we need to keep on talking and reminding what temporary peace treaties give. Let us recall Minsk agreements. What have they given to us? Russia was allowed to work consistently for 8 years with disinformation, propaganda, discrediting of the country, questioning of the willpower of the Ukrainian nation by saying that the country will not be able to resist, that the country would be occupied in 3 days. So this is the time where the aggressor can use to strengthen the efforts against. What happened in 2020? In 2022, Russia has been preparing for this for more than a decade. And this is a much longer period. Well, in terms of the answers on the question on the contribution of universities, here within universities you have to foster critical thinking among students and the understanding of values, that values are most important, that they're key. Certainly, we see this fatigue in our societies. We have planned 5% of spending on defense this year, and now we hear people saying, what about other needs of people? And here in universities, people need to understand and recognize that we first need to invest into defense in order to develop our economies, in order to be resilient to disinformation. The discrediting of democracies and the will to resist is the biggest poison for our societies, and academic communities can foster this resilience to this poison. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker Mieriņa, would you like to address some of the questions?
Jā, es arī pavisam īsi gribu
Yes, I will be very brief, and I would like to comment on the question asked by the Ukrainian representative. What can we say to our allies who want a quick peace? But let me rephrase this question a little bit. If all of our countries would have done much more for the sake of Ukraine, more than we were asked for, Ukraine would have already won this war. Our decisions come too slow, our actions are too slow, and bureaucracy is too large. What I'm saying is that already now we have the opportunity to do more to ensure Ukrainian victory and to achieve swifter peace. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Speaker Hołownia.
Short answer to your question, what would we say to these countries who want the fast track in this peace process? You could be the next. This is the simple answer, you know, and if sometimes I'm taking part in the debates like this in Poland. I'm telling them, imagine if someone is invading our country, taking out two regions like my hometown, Białystok, and Voivodeship of Białystok and Lublin, and after 3 years, someone is coming from outside and saying, but, you know, leave this Białystok and leave this Lublin away. Right now we have to concentrate on the peace because we are so tired and exhausted by, you know, keeping this status of war in Europe. Of course it's unacceptable. And the only country and the only people who can decide what are the good conditions and just conditions of peace here is Ukraine and Ukrainians. And this is the simple answer for that. The question of young gentlemen here, we in Poland, we have quite a different situation because we have like almost a million of Ukrainians who are registered in this national system of identification. They are receiving all the money we are receiving as the citizens of Poland, children payments, social welfare, everything. They are working, 80% of them are working and paying taxes, building, you know, taking their part in our economy. What is good, of course, we are prolonging this support from a year to year by our national bills, and we will be doing that. Right now we have debate in our country what to do with a specific group of people who are receiving children payments and they are not working. And there is a huge political debate over it, but we will solve it anyway. So there will be no change of plans. We are supporting Ukrainians, and doesn't matter what will be the international level decision, we are supporting them with our national funds on our national basis. And they are building our market, so I consider it not as a help, but as an investment in our common future. The question of what universities can do, I can simply answer that the biggest task of universities should be to show people what is the difference between price and value. Because very often in this contemporary world, these two terms are, you know, mixed with each other. They are, you know, this misleading concept that they are equal. Not, they are not. Price is something different than value. And right now the world is concentrated of labeling everything, you know, with the price tag. Without values, it will be killing for us, for our civilization. And it's not only about, you know, the universities are not only about the debates. They are pushing reality further. You know, they are opening new schemes of thinking. They are opening new fields of reacting to things. So I think that we should look at the universities and their task in a pragmatic way, in a kind of profit logic, that we will see to people that there is a real profit out of what you are doing here. And addressing the last question, I think that the most important thing is to show that hope sells better than fear. Right now the politics, even in my country, is concentrated on fear. And I studied psychology. I'm not graduated. I'm sorry, I had no time for that, and I'm really pity. So I'm always intimidated in the places like this. But they teach us at the very first year that it's much easier to manipulate someone if you will first scare him or her to death. Because when you are are coming to someone and trying to persuade him, he will accept it or not. But if he or her is scared, it's much easier to manipulate. The politics based on fear, it's like a political fast food. It works, but for a very short time, and it's not very healthy. We should show that hope is something, because if you will go around and talk to the people, what do they need? They need to be scared to death by this or the other politician who will be pretending that he's a savior for them? No, they want hope for themselves and for the children. For the next generation, hope is the best seller. But we just gave up this strategy and we are following the other, sellers of fear of other things. Last remark, because Jussi said that migration is the factor which is, causing a lot of fears in our societies. It's the same thing in Poland. And we have to manage it. And we have to keep our borders safe, because we cannot allow, sabotages and some propaganda sellers and agents of Putin migrate, one way and the other through our borders. But there is one very important thing in it, that Putin is playing not only the game on the battlefield, he's trying for years to win psychological war and ethical war in our hearts and in our minds. He wants us, in Poland we are really scared that he will come with Kalashnikov right now, or Katyushas will go through Belarusian border. But right now we are on a different stage. He wants us to be worse people than we used to be. He wants to scare us. He wants us to compromise our values, our fundaments. Safety does not exclude humanity. And it should be our motto for this very difficult time. Because if we will follow his instructions and we will be reacting with fear, aggression, hatred and other things, it will be just following his plan. Step after step, step after step. We cannot grant him this kind of satisfaction. We have to be aware that the war is not only in Ukraine, it's already in our heads, in our minds, in our souls, and there is a battlefield too. And we have to be very, very cautious when it comes to the reactions for that, but consequent. Yes. Where there is a need, we should build fence and wall, but we should not forget about building bridges as well, and Rail Baltica, of course.
Thank you very much. Although I'm sure there's much more to discuss, we must now conclude our debate. Let me attempt to very briefly summarize some key takeaways. Mr. Ambassador emphasized that Ukraine needs allies who are true allies, not just friends, not just partners, and Ukraine needs the allies to be resilient and courageous. The speakers have reaffirmed their country's strong commitment to Ukraine, their readiness to support Ukraine as long as it takes and as necessary. They have emphasized the importance of clear goals, the importance of unity, the importance of resolve. They have emphasized the need to step up sanctions to contain aggression and hold the aggressor accountable. Before we close, a quick note. When the debate ends, dear audience, please remain seated until the speakers and their delegations have left the room. Now, let me extend my heartfelt thanks. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I hope that you have felt the unwavering support for Ukraine in this room today. Thank you to the speakers of Parliament who represent the people of 5 nations standing in solidarity with Ukraine. Thank you to the audience for your thoughtful questions, engagement and support. Above all, thank you to the Ukrainian people for their courage and for their determination. Let us work together to bring about a just and lasting peace.
Thank you.